Welcome to LG415. This is the Week 1 lecture for Unit 1, covering Chapters 1 and 2. I'm going to briefly go over these sections because they're basically repetitive throughout the course. If you've taken Canvas courses before with Park, then you know the outline of the units. Every unit has an overview, which basically outlines what you're supposed to be doing for the week. So please read this just to make sure you're keeping up to pace. Each unit will have the required PowerPoint presentations in there, and then you'll have the discussion, homework, and case study. All the assignments are down below. Okay, we're going to get to these in a minute. I do want to go over the discussion requirements to make sure everybody is following track. The requirements for discussions is that you must answer 2 of these discussion topics down here. Okay, they must be in separate threads. So this will be, if you're answering number 1, that would be one thread. If you're answering number 4, that would be an additional thread that you would start. This way, the counting of the discussion questions is a lot easier and provide separate threads for students to respond back to you. Okay, so you have to select 2 of these and answer those, which are your discussion responses. Okay, make sure they're in separate threads. Must be in separate threads. That's what it's there for. You then have 3 additional responses to perform during the week. You can either answer an additional question down here, or you can have at least 2. You must have at least 2 classmate responses or peer responses. So your fellow students will post their answers to these topics. You'll just respond to that. You have to have 2 of those, and to get the 5th one, you can just add an additional peer response if you so desire. So that would be, you might have some option of 3 topics and at least 2 peer responses. That's 5. That's acceptable. You can have 2 discussion topics and 3 peer responses. That's acceptable. You can have 2 discussion topics, 2 peer responses, and then you can just post a question in there if you have specific information, or you're not understanding certain things, or you just want to post a question in general about the subject matter. You can put that in there as well. That would be your 5th post. So there's all kinds of options here for you to get your 5 posts. Anytime that you see an opportunity to post in there, just make sure you've got at least 2 discussion topic questions and 2 peer responses. Okay, and then you have the 3rd option, which is basically up to you. Okay, so that'd be 5 total for the week, and that's how the grades are distributed. Going back to the module, going back to the case study, make sure that you follow these directions to the letter. Okay, you must answer all the questions that are contained in the textbook that relate to the case study. These must be fully explained in a critical analysis. Do not repeat the question at the start of your narrative of your analysis. Look at this as a term paper that you have to address using the data from and the instructions from the case files, which, if there is an Excel file that goes along with the case study, this will be listed in the directions here. You must do the analysis following the instructions on the Excel file, create the charts if they're there, look at the data, analyze the data, and incorporate that in with answering the questions from the text. Okay, remember, this is your opinion. You are trying to develop and convince me that, or convince your instructor that you can understand and you can analyze the situation correctly. You can analyze the charts correctly and apply them to the case study, and you have to tell me what the charts mean. Don't describe the charts. Okay, don't tell me that this is a line chart and it shows how high and how low. That's not what I'm after. What you have to do is analyze the charts. Why are there spikes? Why are there higher levels of data? Okay, why is the data reacting this way? And I'll explain that when we get into the charts when we do the homework review. So make sure that you are analyzing data correctly. Make sure your case studies are single-spaced Word documents, at least 1 to 2 pages. So you'll have 2 separate files, the Word file for your analysis and the Excel file. Try not to incorporate those 2 together. It's easier to grade if the narrative is being read by your instructor and can compare it to the charts to make sure that you're actually doing the comparison and the analysis that's required. Okay? And also, your case studies and your narratives should provide what you think is a potential cause for the problems that are occurring in the scenario and provide some sort of solution for it. Okay, that's part of your assignment. You have to critically think about things using the textbook, what you've read in the text, what you've read in the PowerPoint slides, and using just intuitive and critical thinking, apply the data analysis and answering the questions. But make sure you answer those questions fully, at least 1 to 2 pages in length. Okay, then you'll have two files, the Excel file and the Word document, that must be submitted together. Do not submit them separately. Submit them together in your gradebook. Okay, so those are the requirements for all case studies and all other assignments. Make sure you read the directions within those sections. Okay, so let's look at this first. Let's go to chapter 1. I'm not going to be very long in describing these things, but looking at it from a quality standpoint, one of the questions in your discussion is, who determines quality? Well, the end result is the customer, and that's basically what we're after. Every industry and every service has some sort of industry standard that they must comply with in order to just get things into the market. Okay, there are safety requirements, other kinds of things that are there, regulatory type stuff that has to be complied with at the manufacturing or service provider level to even enter into the market. So that's one set of quality criteria, but we're after who actually determines what quality is, and that would be the customer. If the customer's not willing to pay for your product or service, or they don't believe it's a quality product that they're willing to spend their money on, then you don't stay in business very long. So we have to focus on the customer. The customer perspective is the driving force behind any kind of quality system or quality perspective in this course. Okay, we'll differentiate between the two because we do have to consider the manufacturing perspective about the regulations and requirements, but we're actually focused in on achieving customer reliability, customer loyalty. So we have to make sure that the regulations we're complying with are meeting what the customer wants. Okay, so basically, just like I said before, we have to turn out quality merchandise that consumers will buy and keep on buying. That's the total point of quality, making sure the service and products are meeting customer requirements and customer needs. If they don't buy it, you go out of business. I apologize for that. This thing does that all the time. So let me get back up here. Zipping through this. I apologize for this. The importance of quality, obviously, I'm not going to repeat this, but very simply, the bottom one is the bottom bullet is what you have to be mindful of. No quality, no sales. No sales, no profit. No profit, no jobs. Bingo. So the customer focus, making sure that the customer is satisfied and that you are producing a quality product that they will buy and will continue to buy, is what drives business. This is just basically some of the history of quality. Motorola in the United States came up with like I said, quality revolutions in the 80s, or it's been ongoing since well before that. But Motorola started establishing some quality parameters way back in the 80s that everybody kind of lined up with. Unfortunately, in the U.S. industry, lagged for many decades, from the 40s all the way through about the 80s, relying on quality. Post-war booms and things like that caused a whole bunch of things to generate, and basically what the producers produced is what you had to buy. You really didn't have any other choice. So quality features and things like that slowly came around based on things that were going on. So quality was slow to respond within the industry, and then the government took over and started making regulations, so they had to comply with it. So basically, you were getting quality or getting certain features built into the products, but some were there as aesthetics and not really being implemented. Seat belts are a good example. They came into play based on studies about car accidents and things. But they didn't become standard in the industry until the late 60s, mid 70s, and into the 80s. That's when they became standards for safety features. So all cars now have seat belts, and they're required. Okay, and they have to meet specific requirements to even pass through and be available on the market. So Motorola jumped in with some of the quality perspectives that we're going to be studying throughout the course, but quality has been around since, and quality management techniques and philosophies have been around since the late 30s, early 40s. Defining quality, this is what we look at. Okay, and these are all the things that as customers we determine. These are some of the things we look at, making sure that we have a quality product. Everybody has their own vision of quality, but these are basically encompassing the general view of quality from a customer perspective. And we have to make sure that from a business perspective, and like I say, these are basically from a business perspective, but they also relate over to the customer or the consumer. These things are there because this is what we look for when we go out to purchase something or use something. Definitions of quality. I don't expect anybody to really memorize these, but they're just perspectives, okay? Because again, this applies both to the customer and the provider side of the house. We have manufacturing, customer perspective, value, user, product, and transcendent. So we're looking from both the provider level, we're trying to meet these needs, and we're looking from the consumer level because this is what we expect. Okay, this is what we expect from producers. Producers are looking at these as well to make sure that they meet the customer needs. And so the customers are just basically the ultimate buyers of the goods and services, or the users of goods and services. Okay, and we have several different types of customers. External, obviously, business to business, where one business purchases another one, just say computers or printers like that. You have Xerox and all this kind of good stuff selling to other businesses. So the businesses that are purchasing the copiers or other machines that are necessary are expecting some sort of quality and performance level. That's why they buy them. Okay, flexibility and functionality is what they're looking for. What are internal customers? This is something that kind of drives and keeps from a quality perspective. You forget that you have internal customers. So if you're in an office setting and you perform one function along an administrative line, or let's say we're processing paperwork, so whoever is getting the information at the beginning of the process is doing the data gathering and the baseline information and passing it on to somebody else for them to do what they're supposed to do. That is an internal customer. I'm receiving something from somebody else upstream of the process, and then I'm doing something with it and passing it off to somebody downstream in the process, or maybe to an external customer. So you have customers all the way up and down the process. And what you're looking for is to make sure that whoever is giving you information is providing you the information that you need to fulfill your job, okay, to make your job better, or to make you at least do your job the way it's supposed to be done. So anybody who receives goods or services from someone else within the organization is an internal customer. And quality looks at all of these. They look at the consumer, they look at external customers and internal customers. We have to look at that from that fashion, because if you get something bad from the person upstream, you're not able to do your job, functionally speaking, effectively, and you may be having to correct errors, jump through hoops and things like that to make things right before you can actually do your job to pass it on to somebody else. So quality is strung out throughout the entire process, both external and internal. This is just a real quick history of quality management all the way through. I'm not going to bore you with that. Boy, I did it again. Look at that. One of these days I got to figure out how to keep that from happening. And I apologize again for this. But the history we're not going to go over. You can read these on your own. Six Sigma came around. This is one thing I do want to point out. Six Sigma came around in the 30s and 40s. Okay, actually it was well done beyond that, but Six Sigma is just nothing more. We'll explain this as we go through the course. But Six Sigma is just nothing more than statistical analysis, using data to place information under a bell curve. Okay, and it's totally focused on statistics, customer requirements, specifications, and things like that that are customer focused because customers want specific things, and we have to perform those within a parameter and make sure that we're consistent with it. Everybody understands the global market. Okay, that's why we have so many products on the market nowadays, and you choose. For example, automobiles is the best example. You have a bunch of different automobile manufacturers out there who want your money, and so they're trying to establish a quality aspect, not only from aesthetics, how you see things, colors, and different attributes of the automobile, but actual functioning quality of the automobile. How well is it built? Will it last? Does it perform when it's supposed to perform, and does it perform it well to your satisfaction? That's why we say it's customer focused, results oriented. Okay, that's what quality is. Standards are in the industry that we must meet in order to put the thing on the market, but you determine quality based on your own perceptions, your own ideas and feelings about what you feel is quality and what you're willing to spend your money on. And that's what we're focused on inside this course. We've already talked about these, some of them as well, but basically these are things that are influencing all of our quality in a global market. Okay, we've got the baby boomers down here. Okay, they're getting older, so the new generations are coming up, and they have more technological requirements than what the baby boomers had after World War II. So there's a big difference there. So the markets and the industries are always changing to meet the desires and the needs of the customer. iPhones, smartphones that came about were basically targeted towards bridging the gap between the younger baby boomers and the new generations coming up behind them that were more technologically submerged in all the technology that's been going on over the last 20 years or so. So what we're trying to do is build the gaps between, find those gaps there and fill the gaps with quality products that consumers will buy. Pretty much how this thing is going. And now we have a global market to where we have a bunch of things to choose from, and we're looking at innovation, new ideas, new thoughts, and all that kind of stuff. I remember when cell phones first came out. Okay, Motorola came up with what we called the brick. If you want to go and Google that, the first cell phones were, weighed about 15 pounds. You had to have a pack and have the phone. It looked like a brick with an antenna on it. Basically what it was. Now you've gotten down to where you have a mobile computer in your hand. So that's the innovation part of it that we're talking about. There's new changes and new innovations and new technologies emerging. So we have a wider globalization market, right? And a lot of things out there that are trying to draw in customers, but everybody has their own view of quality. Okay, you like Android, you like iPhones. So whichever way you choose, you have specific things that you're looking for that you determine as a quality product. We're going to skip through this marketing thing. Product design, personally, we're going to get into that a little bit later on as we merge through the course. And I will, about the services, want to jump in here. Services is anything that's given to you that's not really tangible. Okay, this is like oil changes, carpet cleaning, laundry services, folks coming in to repair some sort of appliance malfunction or your car. Okay, something along those lines. A service that doesn't directly produce a product, something that's tangible. Okay, that you can touch, feel. These are just things that are out there. Health services, for example, is another service. Like I said, getting your oil changed, changing your tires, buying tires, getting things fixed. Those are services, but they still have some sort of aspect of quality because you expect certain things to be done, okay, within a reasonable time frame and within a reasonable cost that you consider quality. Okay, so services and products all have to deal with the same kind of thing, a customer focused perspective. Okay, so if you're getting your carpets cleaned for 20 bucks by an independent owner, or you want to go get a professional cleaner that charges $80, well, which one do you think is the most quality? I mean, it all depends on how you determine it and what kind of product, what kind of services or kind of satisfaction you get from those services. You might be well satisfied with a $20 guy. Okay, or you might want to spend the extra $60 to get the professional stuff in there. Maybe they're using the same stuff, same equipment, same method, but this guy here has lower overhead, so he can charge you less. Okay, and the quality and the results are pretty much the same. So how do you determine quality? If you still want to use the $80 one, that's up to you. If you decide to go with the $20 guy, then you're still getting quality but for less cost. Okay, and that's what we're kind of talking about. Again, you can go through these on your own about the critical differences. There's really nothing shocking about these at all. These two here. Okay, the components of service we already talked about: people and technology. We're looking at business functions, but we're not going to go over that. Competitive advantage. This is basically Business School 101. Are you carving a niche inside the market, and are you competitive with other providers? Okay, and that basically quality is part of all of that. Okay, and how you determine it. And as the old saying goes, if you like somebody and you may tell one or two people. If you hate somebody, you're going to tell the entire world. You take out ads, put it up on Facebook, or do something along those lines because you're just ticked and you're not happy with the services that this person provided. So you put negative comments on Yelp or a lot of these other social media or business feedback systems inside the internet. So you can see how this kind of spurns and develops into a customer-oriented database and feedback loop to make sure that quality is being performed to the satisfaction of the customer. Okay, and so that's what that's all about. Personal values. Okay, again, quality is all subjective to your personal feelings about how you determine quality and how you think and what you think is a quality product. That's the biggest thing that we're looking at. And again, customer focused. We want to look at quality from a customer perspective. Foundations. This is real. We're just going to blast through this real quick because you can read this. I don't like dwelling on historical type stuff, even though it's important to understand. We're going to jump right down here to the leaders of revolution. Here's W. Edwards Deming. This is the father of quality management, total quality management. You read his 14 points in the textbook. He took his philosophy to post-war Japan in 1946 or 47, I believe. And he basically created the Japanese industry. He helped develop and reinvent the Japanese industrial complex that is now, producing things at a high quality level. Toyota was one of the first ones to latch on to his philosophy, which is why we call it the Toyota production system. But they took his stuff to heart, and they jumped in full force on the quality bandwagon. And while U.S. was basically saying, well, we don't need that, we're just fine the way we are. Eventually, Toyota and other manufacturers in Japan started sneaking up on the American industry. Same thing for Germany and European manufacturers, to where they were engineering really, really high quality stuff for basically the same amount of money or less money than what was being produced in the U.S. And that's why the market was infiltrated, and we started seeing a lot of this boom and in buying foreign automobiles and other foreign products. It was just the fact that they were making them cheaper and better, and than what America was. That's why we kind of got a little bloated, and why we started slipping off into the world markets. And now quality is full force inside every service or industry worldwide. Duran and Crosby, you can read about those as we go along, but the biggest guy here is Deming and Ishikawa. These two gentlemen here were basically the developers of a whole lot of the total quality management and Six Sigma, the statistical analysis portion of this course. And if you ever go into a training program to get your Lean Six Sigma Green Belt or Black Belt certification, you better study up on your stats because it's coming down the pike. But the thing is, you have to know it. You have to be able to use it and understand it. And as statistics applies to quality, and it's really not that hard. Okay, if I can do it, pretty much anybody can do it. Deming, we're not going to go over this again. You read this in your readings for the week. This is just basically the Jimming chain They improve quality, decrease costs, produce productivity improves, you capture the market, you stay in business, and then you just keep providing jobs and more jobs. So this is a continuous cycle. So once you get jobs, you don't stop. You go back and you continually improve. That's called what we call it continuous process improvement. You continually refine and make your processes better and more efficient and producing better quality or maintaining quality but at a lower cost. So you're always improving your processes, which decrease costs, which increases productivity, which captures and stays in business. The whole thing is just a loop. Okay? So look at this as a big arrow going from here up to here, and you've got continuous process improvement in a nutshell. The 14 points, these are basically abridged versions of it. But there's in there, all these 14 points are just as meaningful today as they were when he developed them back in the 1940s. They're still relevant in today's aspect. A lot of these have a lot of personal impact or impact on your own personal beliefs, but they all are very important, and this is what total quality management is set on. This is the foundation of total quality management. So if you're once you start learning about Deming and his philosophies, you'll see that his points will never go stale because they're always part of the industry. Okay, because they're very poignant. Okay, and they last through time basically. Okay, again, you'll be discussing these in the discussions for week 1. But the point is here just to be familiarize yourself with Deming's 14 points and figure out which ones are real important to you and how you can apply these 14 points to the case study that you'll be doing. Okay, you'll be selecting in the case study, and we'll go to that in a minute, but you'll be selecting what you feel are the most important aspects of the 14 points that apply to the case study and make your case. Okay, variation. Variation is what we call in control, in quality, the enemy of quality. Okay, we're trying to eliminate, reduce, or limit the negative effects of variation. And variation is nothing more than changes in a process. Okay, for example, I like using your signature. If you're right-handed or left-handed, it doesn't matter. But can you actually write your name in cursive the same way each and every time with no mistakes? No, you can't, because there's always going to be variation in those signatures. There's going to be something different. And that's what we call common cause variation. It's inherent to the process, and you can't get away from it. But you can limit the negative effects of that variation. Okay, we still know it's your signature, and the more you write it, the more variation we see. But we can still see that. But there are ways to maybe shrink up that variation a little bit, make it more consistent. Okay, and that is what we call common cause variation. So now let's say we break your writing arm and you have to start writing your name with your other hand. We know what that's going to look like. Okay, it's probably going to be indecipherable. It's going to look like some sort of foreign language, but we know that something happened to cause that change. Okay, that's why we call it assignable cause variation. We can actually investigate, find out what happened that caused that drastic change in the process, and then we can implement solutions to fix that problem or address that problem the way so it doesn't happen again, or if it does, it reduces the drastic effect that we originally saw. So there's common cause, which is inherent to the process, which happens all the time. We're just trying to control it. And then we have assignable cause or special cause variation that is an impactor from external to the process that causes something to happen within the process to go awry. So we see a big change in the process because something external impacted the process. So we can go out there and look, see what happened, and institute solutions to eliminate that, okay, and to reduce its effect or to eliminate it altogether. Going through these experiments, you can read about those. Not going to get into them too much. Geron's is basically the definition of quality. Okay, product performance that results in customer satisfaction and freedom from product deficiencies. This thing got kind of turned around with some of the intuitive or interpretations of what he actually meant. Geron just said he wants freedom from product deficiencies. That's what we're trying to do. Okay, is eliminate defects. Okay, and there's a difference between defects and defectives, which we'll get into in another chapter. But we want to make sure that the product performs what it's supposed to perform. Okay, and that's the fitness for use type of thing. Okay, and from external internal perspectives, is the product that we're producing performing the way the customer wants it to be in such a way that it doesn't drive customer dissatisfaction. Okay, that's Geron. My original thought was on Crosby, and we'll get to that in a minute. But Geron just wants, you just want to make sure that it's working as designed, what it's designed to do, the product or service is designed to do, is performing at that level that the customer is requiring. That's what Geron was all about. Planning, control, and improvement, Geron's trilogy. Quality planning is setting up the process to produce something of a quality nature. You control it and you improve it. You keep improving the process. So that's Geron's thinking. Okay. Actually, we need to go back one thing. I want to make sure is. Yep. Okay. I thought I couldn't remember if this was in the solution or not. I mean, in the presentation or not. But let's go into Crosby. Quality is free. That's not true. Quality is never free. Okay. There is a cost to quality. The more you refine your process, the more you try to make things better, there is going to be a cost to it, whether it be in manpower, equipment, time spent, in some sort of fashion. The meaning here, okay, is that the quality you receive on the end as a customer, okay, you believe it to be already inherent to the process, so it's free to you. So in other words, you're not really, your perspective is that you're not paying for the quality that's in the product that you're using. However, you really are. That's what's put into the cost. So whatever is happening at the producer level, they're spending money to produce a better quality product for you to use, and that has to be transferred to you in some form or fashion. Okay, but his philosophy that quality is free is that the actions that are involved are doing things right the first time. If you set it up to where you do things right the first time, every time, that the quality initiatives that created that process and created those steps to make sure you're building quality into the process eventually even out and usually are not cost impactive. Okay, you don't have to do a whole lot of things to maintain a certain level of quality, even though that's not necessarily true, but you're trying to improve on things, so there's always cost to it. So his philosophy was that once you establish quality into the process, it basically is viewed as free on the other end, or from the consumer end, which is really honestly not the case. You're always, like I said, you're always spending money to constantly improve certain things, and everything has a cost. Okay. This is the one thing that really gets everybody is a zero defect mentality. I'm sure you've heard of it. Zero defects is unattainable. And since we're just talking about it, I will explain the difference between defects and defectives. A defect is just something like a scratch and dent. Okay, you go to the store, you see a dent in a can. The contents are still doing what it's supposed to do. There's no rupture there, so it's not spoiled. I can still use the product inside a dented can. So that's a scratch and dent, right? There might be some minor flaws that aesthetically make you think that there's something wrong, but it really isn't. It can still perform its function. So there are defects in everything. Okay, there's always some sort of defect, but it doesn't affect the performance of the product or service. Okay, a defect is just the opposite. It's something that does impact the performance of the product or service. So defectives have to be removed out of the consumer stream and replaced or reworked in order for them to be usable. Okay, so if you have a fork with only 2 tines on it, yeah, it's still usable. Okay, but is it practical for the purposes that most consumers are expecting? Probably not. They probably want a little more, 2 or 3, because that's what we're used to. If it only has 1 or 2 tines, or one's bent, at a bad angle, it's a defective. Okay, it's really not able to perform its function. You can try, okay, and it may very well perform its function, but we look at it from a quality perspective that it probably cannot perform the function. So we would say that's a defective. And defects, like I say, are scratch and dents. You can never achieve zero defects, but you can strive for it. Okay, that philosophy was basically instituted way long ago, back in the 50s and 60s, about attaining zero defect and the zero defect mentality, which kind of morphed in the 80s and 90s. And people are expecting perfection every time they touch something, and that is impossible to achieve. There's always going to be defects or in every process and every product. There's something wrong somewhere. Okay, well, it's aesthetic or somewhat manufacturing that doesn't cause a major problem, but it doesn't work as designed all the time. Okay, there's always going to be problems. So zero defects is a bad mentality state because you're never going to achieve it. But striving to achieve zero defects is the goal. Okay. The last person I'm going to talk about is Ishikawa, Kaoru Ishikawa. Like I say, he was basically came up with a lot of the Japanese strategies and the Six Sigma and data analysis, data-driven decision making that we incorporate in Six Sigma today. He advocated a lot of different things that we can use as part of the quality process to data gathering statistics, and comparing them to a standard or what we're looking for, how we're performing, how we're supposed to be performing, and we can do a comparison analysis of that process, which you will also be doing in this course. Okay, the rest of this is very simple. This is what the core quality management principles right there is the top one: customer focus. Have to focus on the customer demands and requirements and continuously improve the process. That's what this is all about. Okay, I'm not going to go through the ISOs type of stuff or the leadership practices or involvement. You can look at this because all this refers back to Deming's 14 points. The only one I really want to point out is, again, the continual process improvement, or CPI, continual process improvement. That's what that is. We're trying to improve our processes all the time, make them more efficient. Like I said, the rest of this is very generic kind of thing. It's something you have to look at, and I've already talked about variation and statistical thinking. We're not going to go over that. We're going to get into a different into these as we go along. Again, here's the types of variation I've already addressed: common and special or assignable causes. And the red bead, like I said, these are just examples of how we do it. This is a control chart, which we're going to get into in a couple of weeks. And of course, whoa, how about that? I left that in there. Notes to instructors. Well, there you go. So now you're instructors. So now you can go in there and look at what the actual, how do you do, if you want to use these experiments and try to visualize what's going on, that's fine. But we're going to look at all this in the coming weeks. Okay, so don't get too wrapped up in that. So that's the week one lecture. I know I kind of breezed through it, but I wanted you to get the highlights and understand what we're looking at from a quality aspect. That way you can focus in and look at a perspective from the customer. That's who we're trying to deal with, and that's who we're trying to satisfy. So quality is always focused in on the customer level. What can we do to make our product better, to make the customer want to spend their money to buy our product or service? Okay, and that will end the lecture number one. Thank you very much.